Hello guys, what's up? We are back with another video. Thank you guys so much for 50 subscribers. This is awesome. We're growing very slowly, but I'm going to start putting out some more videos. Today we have a very exciting video. We're going to be putting all the different kinds of ships in the game on a tier list. They'll be rated on how useful they are, how impactful they have been to the game, and overall just how fun they are to use. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy the video, and thank you again for watching. I divided the tier list up into 6 tiers, ranging from S tier all the way down to F tier. And there's one additional secret tier which I will reveal at the end of the video, so stick around to find out. Without any further ado, let's get to the ranking. To start off our tier list, we will be reviewing different kinds of farmers. There are several subcategories within this group, but the first that usually comes to mind is the material farmer. Material farmers are often considered a necessity for all players since they are the primary source of acquiring materials which are needed for pretty much every single ship in the game. Farmers have significantly evolved over the years, but no matter the meta or the design or ammo, material farmers will always be cornerstones of Dredark due to the consistent need for resources. We're going to start off this tier list strong and put the material farmer in the S tier. I just don't see how it could be placed any lower, just due to how important it is. Next, we have a newer kind of ship, the core farmer. I guess it's not really too new at this point, but since I've just kind of come back after like 2 years of not playing, it does feel kind of new to me. Core farmers are great at one very specific thing, getting cores. Now, similar to materials, cores are needed for a good chunk of ships in the game, but I would say to a slightly lesser extent than metal or explosives, since people who don't participate in war as often likely won't need to farm cores regularly. For this reason, I'm going to have to put it in B tier. It's good, I just don't think it's been around long enough, and I don't think it's as necessary compared to a lot of the other ships on this list. We have another new addition to our list, the laser farmer. If you're trying to farm flux, rubber, or ice, this is going to be the most reliable and consistent method nowadays. Because of laser enthusiasts absolutely cracked drop rates, you can make like 1k flux or rubber in under an hour. However, I will say there are some downsides that come with this. Compared to running missions, it usually consumes a lot more time and resources. Additionally, since drops are doubled in PvP zones, it's most typically used in Falcon, meaning you are putting your ships at greater risk of being completely wiped. This is especially bad if you are on war clans, so because of this I will put laser farmers in B tier. I do think they have a lot of value, but they can be a bit time consuming. The last new addition to our tier list, we have coward farmers. Now, I personally love farming cowards. It's very relaxing, you don't have to deal with the threats of farming in the PvP zones like a lot of the other farmers on this list. I really do enjoy it. I like throwing on like a YouTube video in the background and then just zoning out for an hour or two and just farming. However, I do need to acknowledge the long list of downsides that come with coward farming. First of all, the drops for the cowards are pretty terrible. The coward is pretty much only good for farming 2 things, the MSUs and balls. And as useful as MSUs are becoming, 1 hour of farming cowards should leave you with enough MSUs for quite a long time. Balls are pretty much useless as well, although some people do enjoy collecting them and they can be traded in for a decent amount of flux if you find the right person. Second thing, unless you are using a preloaded farmer, you will spend a very large amount of time just trying to keep your resources up since the drop rates for EXP, metal, and ammo are very low. Now, I will say the effects of this can be mostly alleviated by using obtuse cannons, however, you'll still need to allocate some of your time just getting ammo, getting metal, getting EXP. Honestly, it's kind of boring compared to going and chasing the coward. I hate to say it, but I do think this means that the coward farmer has to be placed in F tier. Unless you're in dire need of getting MSUs, or you're grinding balls, or you're trying to get a leaderboard placement, there just really isn't any reason to farm them. Now we're finally moving on to the next category, warships. And we'll start with this category strong with damage ships. Now, damage ships have probably seen the most changes compared to other ships over the years. With all the meta changes, the most viable ammo combination has changed numerous times, but despite whatever changes have been made, damage ships have always remained a necessity for war. After all, without damage ships, there is just no way to actually kill ships. Right now, I think damage ships that use standard ammo machine cannons are incredibly viable in the PvP meta. I think a lot of people would agree with this. Maybe even too viable. Probably needs a nerf if we're being honest. But in the past, there's also been other ammos that have seen popularity, like Sniper. Punch Flak was a good combination for a very long time, and Slug as well. Damage ships are always going to remain useful in war, no matter what changes come to the meta, just because how important it is to be able to kill enemy ships, and really, the way you're going to be doing that 90% of the time is with damage ships. I'm going to place it in A tier. I just don't quite think it would be S tier because there is one counter to damage ships. Ultimately, the best counter for damage ships in the game are ones that are designed with the sole purpose of just eating up as much damage as possible, which is why we have tanks. Now, tanks have been around for a long time. They've always been characterized by their large size, with the focus on having a large health pool and lots of healing. Originally, they typically used a combination of slug and yank ammo with the goal of keeping enemies in close proximity to maximize the slug's value. Sometime in the mid to late 2020s, these ships kind of became less viable due to the meta shift, which ended up nerfing yank and encouraged longer range encounters, resulting in tanks being easily pinned and left almost completely defenseless against these longer range damages. Recently though, tanks have seen renewed use as damage spam and close range encounters have become increasingly large issues in wars, and tanks are just great at absorbing large amounts of damage with little loss in their functionality, and they're super quick to repair. You can usually just RCD repair them in 10-20 minutes. Their large size also can be used to great benefit, shielding allies from enemy attacks or body blocking enemy damages. I do think right now they are very useful, but I kind of see their position in the meta to be a bit fragile, because even a small meta shift could change the meta to become more long-range focus, and tanks will obviously suffer a lot from this because they benefit from these close-range encounters. Because of this, I think the tanks deserve a B tier placement. No matter the meta, there has always been one kind of ship that has retained super high usage rates: punchers. On paper, they do not seem to be that great. They have super lackluster damage, otherwise all around average stats, but the one thing that really separates them from the rest of the crowd is its ability to keep ships away or completely immobilize them by pinning them. This makes punchers incredibly difficult to focus on, since they can usually just punch you away the second they start getting attacked. Most of the time, they will be the primary factor in securing kills. They're very useful for crowd control situations as well, being able to rearrange ally or enemy ships to favorable positions very quickly. I do think they perhaps struggle a bit more in this current meta as opposed to past metas, just because the prevalence of yank damages, they can get sucked in by them and shredded somewhat quickly. But punchers have just been around for such a long time and have always been incredibly viable, so for that reason I'm going to put them in S tier. Another ship that has seen renewed use lately is yankers. They're essentially the opposite of punch. They pull ships towards them instead of punching them away, which can be a double-edged sword, as it is much better at securing kills on ships that are running away. However, this comes at the trade-off of being easy targets for damage ships due to the fact that they cannot run if they're in danger like punch can. Similarly to punchers, these ships are great at crowd control, and because of the close range meta right now, they have seen quite a bit of use, especially in combination with other damages, but I don't think they are strong enough to warrant any placement higher than C tier. Meta changes would likely affect the yank ammo a lot more drastically than the others, so this placement could change very quickly as well. Finally, the last ship in the warship category, we have looters. Now, looters kind of got pigeonholed into just one very specific, albeit very valuable use case. Looters are characterized by using most of the space in their ship to hold loot, and usually use flak or scatter ammo. They are typically brought after an enemy ship is already pinned or dying, as opposed to bringing it during the actual fight, since they lack the ability to fight ships in one-on-one combat typically. Once an enemy ship is pinned, however, looters will completely shred through the ships. Damages, while great at quickly critting and RC stripping enemies, struggle to destroy the internals of the ships compared to looters, which have higher DPS and greater ammo spread. They can quickly pick up large amounts of loot to be later ejected into other ships, meaning they will usually be the most profitable ships to use during war. I think that looters deserve a B tier placement since although they may struggle in actual combat, their primary use provides very significant value as opposed to most other warships. Now that we are done with warships, we will be moving on to event ships. The first ship we will cover in this group are pitters. These ships are used for the pits event and typically have punch on the top, left, and right side while utilizing a combination of slug or standard and yank at the bottom. They are typically small, usually anywhere from about 2x2 turrets to 4x7 turrets, although there are a few exceptions to this. I have seen some larger ones out there, but in general they tend to be a little bit smaller than a lot of other ships. In terms of events, Pits is arguably the most profitable. However, due to the large amount of competition, the loot you receive can vary greatly from anywhere between a few cannons and 1 to 2 stacks of flux to up to 1,000 flux, 500 rubber, and 20 machine cannons. This is the event I have probably the most experience with, and I personally find it to be one of the most enjoyable. These have stood the test of time as well, and they have seen very little change over the years, but I do think there are better options for getting flux and rubber nowadays, so I will place pitters in B tier. Canary ships are an unfortunate relic of the past. Pre-2021, Canary used to be the go-to mission for flux. It would always be completely stripped of flux in mere minutes and was considered by many to be the best mission. I definitely enjoyed running Canary with my merges and a little 2x2 manual miner back in the day, but the new changes, I really just cannot justify anyone doing this mission. Compared to Pits and Vulture, Canary is a barren wasteland with little to no loot. The only redeeming factor is that it can be a good source of machine cannons, which are incredibly valuable right now. But even knowing that, it hardly feels worth doing, since with even just one other person doing Canary, you will end up getting at most 300 to 400 flux and maybe 50 different turrets, which is just not nearly as worthwhile as the other missions. I'm going to put Canary ships in D tier. I don't think they're quite useless enough to be dropped down to F tier, but they are definitely the least valuable out of all the event ships. Vulture ships are, in my opinion, the most consistently profitable event ships. Even with competition, I still often get runs totaling upwards of 1,000 flux, and on top of that, it's just the most fun event. I don't have too much else to say other than it's just super profitable and fun. Only downside would be occasionally getting damages to the ship, which does bring the rating down from S to A tier for me, but either way, very useful ship. I think everyone should run Vulture once in a while. Storages encapsulate a very large number of different ships, but the main idea is simple. They don't typically go out of Freeport, and they are used to store all of your loot. The first kind of storage we will review is the main storage. This is where players will spend 90% of their time in-game. Main storages are essentially a jack of all trades. They do everything the other ships in the storage category do. The only downside is this means reduced storage space for pretty much everything, but this doesn't really matter. Whether you need to build, refuel, drop off loot, or recycle, main storages will be able to do all of it, which is why I have to put them in S tier. They are the most essential ship in the game by far, and if anyone tells you otherwise, they are objectively wrong. Material and core storages only have one use. They store all of the materials and cores that you cannot fit into your main storage. Despite the very simplistic nature of these ships, pretty much every player who ends up playing this game for more than a couple months will end up needing one of these, and some people who particularly enjoy or spend a lot of time farming will need multiple. I am personally not a big farmer, and I don't think a lot of players are, so I don't see this as an absolute necessity. Typically, I just farm enough to fill up my main storage when it's low, and although they are good to have, like I said, just not necessary enough to warrant a super high placement, so I will put it in B tier. Next, we have ammo makers. Many people will have one of these included in their main storages, but personally, I don't really like wasting space for a mediocre ammo maker, so I prefer to have a completely separate ship dedicated just to making ammo. Now, obviously, this means that they aren't entirely necessary, but if you are in a war clan, then you'll most definitely want to have one of these. It also doubles as a little bit of extra mat storage, so there's that nice little additional use to it. I'm going to put it in C tier, just because a lot of people probably don't need one and just have one in their storage anyways. The last ship that we have in the storage category is Scrappers. Again, this is one of those kinds of ships that you probably don't need, since many main storages already include an adequate recycling system, but for me personally, I like having a ship dedicated just for scrapping ships. These are absolutely not necessary, but it can be a great way to get loot fast if you have a bunch of old ships that are half damaged. I'm going to put them in C tier since obviously they might have more limited use for a lot of people, but I think they cycle things a little bit faster than an ordinary storage would, and they double as extra storage space. The next category is going to be a little different than the other categories. These are ships that I really couldn't fit into any other categories, mostly because their function just doesn't align well enough with the others. I think arguments could maybe be made that a few of them could be placed in different categories, but for now, they'll just be put into this miscellaneous category. I will also mention some of the ships in this category don't have any inherent function to them, so they will simply be judged on how fun they are. Scouts are very self-explanatory. Use them to go out and scout for enemy ships. They're usually about 1x1 turret with just a hatch, helm, and navigation unit, so they're one of, if not the easiest ship to make in the game. I think most people probably have one of these, but I would argue they are definitely not a necessity, mostly because farming clans really have no need for them, and if you're in a war clan, you can just rely on other people to scout for you. I'm not saying this means they're useless, because they obviously have a lot of use still, especially for war clans, but not quite necessary enough to warrant a super high placement. I'm going to be putting them in C tier for now. Art ships used to be one of the most impressive kinds of ships out there. I loved seeing people make all kinds of cool handmade art, but unfortunately, someone went and made an extension that allows images to be turned into a grid overlay that tells you exactly what color to place where, so pretty much any creativity there was just obliterated. This may be a bit of a hot take, but I think this extension should be banned because it completely undermines the creative talent many people who have spent a lot of time making pixel art in this game have accrued. Before this extension, I probably would have put art ships in A or B tier, but now I'm going to be dropping it all the way down to D tier just because they're not nearly as impressive knowing that. Now, I could do a whole separate video on how awesome parkour ships are. Parkour is probably the single most unappreciated aspect of this game, and especially since the test server no longer supports public ships, it has been forgotten by the majority of the community. I may be biased, but parkour is one of the single most fun parts of this game. I've spent numerous hours just playing or building parkour ships, and I really wish the small forgotten corner of the game got some more recognition. Again, this rating is going to be super subjective, but I don't really care, it's my video. Easy S tier for me. Similar to parkour ships, I think minigame ships are often overlooked. The only difference between them and parkour ships is the quality varies far more. I would say 90% of parkour ships, even noob parkour ships, can be entertaining. With minigames, it can be very hit or miss. I absolutely love minigames like Retro's Rocket Racing and this Expando soccer game, but I've also seen far too many poorly made fishing ships in my lifetime to warrant minigames higher placement than A tier, so that's where they'll sit for now. I will say, some minigames though, definitely would be S tier on my list, but since we're judging them as a whole, they're going to sit in A tier. This is probably going to be a controversial one, because the community seems to be very split on whether these ships should even be allowed in the first place. Auto traders provide great passive value, but they do require a script to run 24/7. Personally, I have no issue with them, but I have seen some auto traders with absolutely horrible exchange rates. I think if people want to make auto traders, so be it. It's great passive value, and new players might also find it useful, so I'm going to put them in C tier. They're definitely not necessary, but it can be good to get some passive wealth. Second to last ship on this tier list, and last in the miscellaneous category, we have gambling ships. These are my least favorite ships in the game, by far. These ships belong in the depths of the underworld, the ninth circle of hell, whatever you want to call it. I really do not know why anyone spends flux on these things, especially the Palinkos with a 1 in like several million chance to win. Like why? Just why? You are throwing away your flux at that point. They almost always have terrible odds, and honestly, I think these ships should just be entirely removed from the game. We shouldn't be introducing gambling to children. It just... no. S tier, yeah. And then, last but not least, in their own special little category, we have noob ships. Man, I swear to God, no matter the meta, no matter the number of updates, every noob ship looks basically identical. You have really weird sizes, not enough thrusters, random turrets on every single side, and a jumble of blocks, expanders, and fabricators everywhere. If you ask me, absolute perfection. Gets special placement in noob tier. Anyways, that's it for the tier list. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. If you could like and subscribe, it would mean the world to me. Seeing people enjoy my videos really motivates me to put more out. I will see you guys next video. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.